And
Okay, can you still hear me?
yes, I can still hear
Can
you.
you hear me?
And we are live and we are
Okay,
recording.
great. Okay. Great.
That would have
Awesome.
been fun after all that troubleshooting.
I know. Well, all of a sudden um what's interesting is all of a sudden the tone in my headphones became different. So I
Oh
wasn't sure if
no.
you could still hear me. So,
Well,
yay.
good morning. This is First
Good
Friday
morning.
Facebook Live. We had all of our tech troubleshooting and still managed to have a little blip there in the beginning. We are here with Heather Satterley of Satterley Training and Consulting. Welcome. Do you want to tell us a little
Thank
bit
you.
about you and your business?
Sure. So I am an accountant, QuickBooks Pro Advisor, and I like to call myself an accounting technologist. So I love all kinds of technology related to accounting and running your business. So I've been working with QuickBooks since the late 90s. Started doing some integration work in the mid 2000s and just fell in love with that. So what I focus on really is helping small business owners, users, accountants, bookkeepers, whatever. I help them implement new technology in their businesses. So that's really what I love to do.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah.
the reason we had you here today, as you know, is we want to talk a bit. March is Fraud Prevention Month, and we
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about how we can utilize technology to help small business owners prevent fraud in their business. So,
And
should we just dive in?
I think we should just dive in. I think we should just dive. I think, and I think you would agree with me, Vanessa, on this. That I think the number one mistake that so many business owners make, regardless of the industry or what they're doing, is that they share their passwords. So they share
Yeah.
the passwords to their technology with somebody else in the office, their accountant, their bookkeeper. And anytime you're sharing passwords and somebody has that written down, there's always an increased risk of that
Yeah.
information being compromised. And that
Yeah.
gets into the wrong hands. That could be a huge problem
Yeah.
for your business.
We have to educate people about that a lot. I have had multiple clients email me their login and password to their business bank account.
Right.
And there are just layers of issues there.
Right. There are so many issues there. And I mean, it seems, you're working with your accountant, you trust your accountant, and most of the time it's your accountant, you should trust your accountant, and your accountant probably isn't going to do anything with your password. The problem is that if you give them the password and it's on their computer or on their phone or in their email, there's the possibility that somebody else is going to intercept that. And now they're going to have, the login credentials to, your bank or your apps or whatever. So luckily there is technology out there that is safe to use to share passwords in a secure way, so that you can store your passwords in an encrypted app and then share those passwords out with other users. They never see your password. So what the app does is it actually masks the user credentials. And when you go to the app in your browser, it will automatically fill the credentials, but it's completely encrypted. So
Nice.
that's one way that people can share passwords with other users that need access to their information without actually, sending it insecurely.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that
Yeah.
way also you can remove their access. I know that some of the apps have options too where you can see when things were last accessed, all that kind
Right.
of fun stuff.
Absolutely. You want to look, when you're looking at these types of apps, you want to see what kind of audit log they have. So are
Yeah.
they keeping track of when people log in? Are they keeping track of when credentials are changed? One of the things that you want to look at with some of these apps is you want to make sure that when you start to use them, they're usually browser add-ins. So you'll have an app, a password app, and there's a few that allow the sharing functionality. There's LastPass, Teams, that allows you to share. There's Password Boss, 1Password, and Dashlane Business. And all four of those allow you to share your passwords securely with other users. You've got to make sure that you turn off the setting in your browser to remember your passwords. So if you're using Google Chrome, or you're using, Internet Explorer or Edge, or I don't think anybody's using Internet Explorer anymore, but Edge or Mozilla Firefox, all of those have the ability to save your password. They have their own password locker kind of built in, and you have to disable those, because what can happen is if you share your password and somebody uses the shared password and it says, hey, we just entered a password, do you want to save it? When they click yes, it can save the password to their password, the browser's password
Right.
log. And then it's kind of
Defeats the purpose. I wouldn't have even thought of that. And that can be interesting if you're working with a remote team. You don't really have control over what they do within their own browser.
Right. Yeah.
That
Which is
is a
why
good
it's
thing to think
important.
about.
And I think that's why it's important to work with somebody that really knows what they're doing to make sure, especially if you're in an industry. I mean, this is applicable to all businesses, but if you're in an industry where you're dealing with a lot of sensitive data, you really want to have somebody that has a really good understanding of cybersecurity on your team to help you with those types of things. And a lot of times the insurance companies, if your insurance company that you're working with, they can also provide you with a lot of information to make sure you're compliant. So if you have, most people should have, especially if you're dealing with sensitive client data, should have a cybersecurity policy or rider on your insurance policy, and your insurance company has the information because they're the ones that are going to pay you for the claims. So they certainly know how you can prevent it, because they don't want to have to they want to help you so they don't have to pay those claims.
Nice.
Yeah. So the other piece of technology that I think everybody should have, you can see I love this stuff.
Yeah.
Is a VPN. So there's VPN services. There's a couple different types of VPNs. There's a VPN that is actually a piece of hardware. And what a VPN does is it encrypts your connection to the internet and protects it so that people can't see the data that you're transmitting to the different applications that you use. So there's hardware, and that hardware could be your router that's in your office, and you could have VPN service that's loaded on the router, and that's actually the safest one to have because it covers all of the computers and all the devices on your network.
Nice.
Right? As soon as it's on that kind of gateway, right, of entry, it's there, it's blocking anything that's connected to that will be protected. But you also want to connect your mobile devices, right? Because what can happen is if you're using your mobile device and you connect to public Wi-Fi,
right,
people can see, if it's not encrypted, they can see what you're typing in, and people can steal your information that way. So there's lots of VPN applications for both your computers and your mobile devices. The one that I use is called Vord, V-O-R-D, VPN, or Nord, sorry, I just misspelled it. It's Nord, N-O-R-D, VPN. And it's less than $10 a year for one device, and you can protect all your devices, I think, for like $35 for a year.
Oh, that's nothing.
Nothing. And what it does is it has all kinds of fancy features where you can mask your IP address, super secure. There's double layer security, all kinds of stuff that you can do. I do the basic. Sometimes I'll do like a dedicated IP address depending on the applications that I'm working on. But it just connects to it makes a connection to a secure server on the service so that people can't see the data that you're sending to the different sites that you visit. Yeah. So that's a good one. And those are really cheap. So a couple of those are the NordVPN, which I use. There's one called PureVPN. And then one that I've also used that I really liked was Avast Secure Line VPN. That's a good one too.
I used to use their antivirus. I know Avast for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people don't know, Vanessa, is that your a virus protection, a lot of times if you have like full service internet security, it comes with a VPN service that you can use for free on your phone. So you could check. And see
definitely worth checking. I've never even, honestly, never even heard of VPNs. So I learned something today.
No, it's really important. It's really important to make sure that people aren't, because they do that. They look for information or traffic that's going over the open Wi-Fi, and they can intercept it. So the VPN prevents them from doing that.
Nice. And what about apps for business owners that work with their accounting software that would help them either prevent or catch fraud if it happens?
So with QuickBooks Online, which is what I normally use,
us too.
Yeah, that there's some tools that are actually built into the software to help you detect fraud. So it's a sad fact that a lot of fraud, in fact, a huge percentage of the fraud that happens internally in companies. So an employee decides that maybe they're not being treated fairly, or maybe they're going through some financial trouble, and so they start to siphon some money out of the company. So there's some things, there's some tools inside QuickBooks Online that can help your business owners detect fraud in their own companies. And a big one is the audit log, right? The audit log in QuickBooks Online, which you can find through the little gear icon on that top right.
Yeah.
And that can show you, what anybody's doing. You can filter it by user to kind of see what's going on. And I think the things that I would look for are people deleting transactions, right? So somebody enters a sales receipt and then deletes it. Right. That would tell me. I'd raise an eyebrow and say, why are you deleting sales receipts out of my QuickBooks data?
Or if vendor names being changed on checks after they're printed.
Mm-hmm. Or amounts being changed on checks after they're printed. Yeah. So the audit log is great. There's also a report in the report center called Void Deleted Transactions Report. So you can review that, and you should review that periodically. I would say at least once a month as part of your month-end close. Just take a peek and see what's, are there really shouldn't be many things that are deleted or voided in a QuickBooks company. Would you agree with that, Vanessa?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
for me, I err on the side of voiding, not deleting. And when I do void it, I put in a good memo. And often, if I've had correspondence with the client, I'll just copy the text of the email right into the transaction so that if I ever go, why was this voided? Oh, that's why.
I do the exact same thing. I always tell people, if you can void rather than delete, that's the best way to go. And just put a little note in there. So if anyone has a question later, or even yourself, you'll remember why you were avoiding it.
I always tell my clients, use the memo, use the memo, use the memo, because 6 months from now, you will not remember what you bought at Walmart. You just won't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then third-party apps that have approvals. So, when you're working, with employees and that it could be an employee, it could be a subcontractor, and they have access to your financial data. I think that having an approval process to make sure that you're checking what they're doing, as far as, like for signing, checks for paying your bills.
Yeah.
If you're still using checks, which a lot of business owners aren't using checks anymore, they're paying everything electronically, make sure those checks are locked up. I had 2 clients over my career that had checks stolen. And before they realized they were stolen, somebody had gone out and written a whole bunch of checks. So if you do have checks, make sure you lock them up.
Yeah. My horror story, before I became a bookkeeper, when I was an office manager, the business owners, when they would go out of town, would leave me with a stack of signed checks.
Oh.
Now, luckily, I'm a very honest person. Nothing ever happened. But a couple years later, I'm like, wait a second. They just left me with a bunch of signed checks so that I could take care of business.
And I think from an employee standpoint, that's something that people don't think about. They think, oh, my employer trusts me, they're going to give me signed checks. But that's actually a real liability, because if they leave you signed checks and all of a sudden they go missing,
it would have come back.
Most likely you're going to be the one they're looking to find out what happened. So that's never a good policy. But there's apps out there now, like Bill.com and Pluto and Circulus, that have the ability, you can have your bookkeepers queue up all of your electronic payments and your bill payments, and then you have the ability to go through and approve them. And what's nice about these apps is you can actually see the bill, so you can do that whole review process, electronically.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. And Expensify, if you have expense reports, Expensify is an app that allows you to connect your bank and credit card accounts and take pictures or upload receipts. And then you set the rules for your company. I need a receipt for anything over $10, $25, whatever it is. Anything over a certain amount has to go through, an approval process. That's always a good idea.
And I know both Bill.com and Expensify can also do layered approvals. So if you work at a larger company and their manager and then somebody else approves it, and both of those apps I'm familiar with and have used and really enjoy. Expensify, side note, will also do mile tracking if you're, as a lot of business owners do, having trouble tracking your miles. It's a good one for that as well.
Right. And the other one that we can't forget, Vanessa, is T-sheets.
Yes, we
right?
love
T-sheets
T-sheets.
for time tracking, because T-sheets is, time tracking. You say, yeah, okay, time tracking. QuickBooks has time tracking in it, right? Why would I need T-sheets? But the brilliant thing about T-sheets is it has that GPS tracking.
Yes.
So you can actually make sure that if you have a remote team or you have field service, you know that your employees are where they're supposed to be. It has facial recognition to clock in.
Yeah.
So, they've done, T-Sheets has done some really interesting studies where, they've learned that one of the biggest forms of theft and fraud in a business is time theft,
Yeah.
right? Where employees clock in a little bit early, or maybe their friend clocks them in and they're not there. And that can be really expensive, because not only you losing the wages that you've paid the person, but you're also losing the payroll taxes that you've paid on top of those
Yes.
wages, the insurance, your workers' comp is all based on your payroll numbers. It
Yeah.
can really get big quickly.
Absolutely. No, T-Sheets is awesome. And it's also really awesome, not to tangent, but I like it personally for time management,
Oh,
because
yeah.
you clock into what you're working on. It helps you track what you're doing, what you're getting done. It helps me focus. It's one of our favorite apps internally. It's really wonderful.
It
And
is.
if you're still doing handwritten time cards, there's going to be issues.
It's just that, handwritten time cards are just fraught with error,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
People forget, they're
Oh, yeah.
writing things down and they get distracted, so they write down the wrong time. You add them, you have to add them all up manually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They wrote something, you can't quite read that. Is it a 5 or an 8?
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, that is awesome. Is there anything else that, the one that jumped up in my news feed this morning, actually, just because coincidentally, exactly a year ago today, thank you, Facebook, we did another one of these Facebook Lives with Cash Flow Tool. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
and the awesome thing there to really help with fraud prevention is you get your little summary email every time it updates, and it tells you if there are any new vendors or customers that have been added to your QuickBooks. So then you can see if one of your employees added their best friend as a vendor and wrote them a check, you get a little alert. And that's a really awesome tool.
It's also cool because they have the diagnostic and cash flow tool. If you have kind of an outlier expense, so if your expenses
Yes.
have been at a certain level, and all of a sudden, like say you're paying your utilities and your electric bill is $250 every month, all of a sudden it's like $1,000. It will it'll bring that up and say, hey, this is unusual. You might want to take a peek at this,
Yeah.
which is nice.
And there are other cool things that aren't fraud related, and that it'll tell you how many days cash on hand you have,
Right.
and it'll
Right.
do all this fun forecasting stuff. But for the fraud piece, it's pretty awesome.
It really is. And then the last thing that I would say, I mean, not the last thing, but another thing I would say, and it's not really technology related, but I think it's super important, is review your bank reconciliations. So even if you have, even if you have a bookkeeper that's doing your books, you want to make sure you're looking at those bank recs and that you're taking just a couple of payments and making sure that your accounting records, that the amounts match what's
Yeah.
on that bank statement. I had a client years and years ago where they lost $40,000 because
Wow.
somebody on their team was cooking the books, and if they had just checked their bank statement against those reconciliation reports, they would have found that there were discrepancies.
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate reality that we don't like to talk about as bookkeeping professionals is the highest rate of fraud is with bookkeeping professionals, because by the nature of their titles, small business owners tend to trust us, and they don't
Right.
do background or reference checks, and they don't say, no, really. They just want to start handing you all their information, and it happens
Right.
regularly. A couple years ago, we had a fraud prevention fair here in Southern Oregon, and one of the things I was doing was making posters for it, because why not? Because I'm a grown up. And I remember I did a Google search just looking for headlines to put all over this poster, and it took no time flat. All of them were current year, and it was just news story after news story after news story after news story, and it's scary.
You're so right. And I think, small business owners are looking for somebody to take that pressure off and to really just handle everything. I hear it all. You must hear it all the time too. I hear it all the time where somebody comes to me and they're like, I just want you to do it.
Yeah.
It's stressful. It's unpleasant for me. I don't like it. Just do it. And, if I'm a bad seed, right. And I'm not a, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? It's gone. But, you know, if I'm not an ethical person, that was the word I was looking for. If I'm not an ethical person, then you've basically handed me the keys to all your stuff. And, you know, so it is important to check, you know, to look at the reports that your bookkeeper's providing you. Make sure that those numbers make sense. You know, make sure when you're looking at the gross profit margin, if it's not making sense, ask the questions. It's okay. That's why we're here, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And review those bank reconciliations. Review your credit card. If you have an employee that has a credit card for your company, review the credit card statements. Make sure all of those expenses are real business expenses.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a client who had a lot of employees with credit cards out in the field. And when we started really paying attention to those statements, it's amazing how many fewer accidents started happening.
Right.
Because when we first started, it was like, oh yeah, that was an accident. That was an accident. That was an accident. And 6 months later, there were 0 accidents somehow.
And that's right. And you bring up a great point there, Vanessa, that even just, you know, letting them know that you are checking. I mean, you don't have to do it every day, but just if they're aware that you are watching and you are verifying, that will change behavior for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, it's not technology related, but any business that handles cash, you really need to count it. And if it doesn't match, you need to ask the question. Don't be embarrassed. I know a lot of business owners are scared and embarrassed about feeling like they're accusing somebody and they trust their team. If the person's honest, they won't be bothered by the question. No. They just won't.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. So it's unfortunate that we need these tools, but it's reality, right?
It's reality, and it's good to have them. And even if you implement 3 or 4 of these tools and nothing pops up, that's just good news. That's just, you know,
exactly
doing your due diligence. It's, you know, you go to the doctor for a checkup whether you're sick or not. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they find something and sometimes they don't, but you don't stop going.
Right.
In theory.
Absolutely. Super true. And then the last one thing I want to mention about technology is secure file storage. Oh. So if you're storing your tax returns, your employees' W-4s or any sensitive information, and you've got it in a free Google Drive account, might want to rethink that.
Yeah.
That's not super secure, and somebody gets access to your Google account, they're going to have access to your Google Drive. Right. They're going to have access to your email. You want to look at apps like ShareFile or Box or Smart Vault, but apps that are encrypted and have multi-level authentication is really important as well.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I think we are just about, you said that was the last thing you wanted to mention. Is there
It was. I could go on. I could talk fraud all day. But yeah, I think those are the important ones, you know. Yeah. Protect your passwords, protect your sensitive documents, you know, secure your internet connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then use, you know, and verify your data. You know.
And I will also add as my closing thought, I know a lot of small business owners will come to something like this, get all the ideas and think they have to do everything today. Pick one.
Right.
Pick one, roll it out. Once you're comfortable with it, pick the next one, because it's so easy to overwhelm yourself and then throw it all out because you can't deal with it. It's too much. Especially transitioning your passwords, expect that to take time. Expect it to take time.
It does take time, and you need to pay attention to what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And it's okay to ask for help, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Heather. This was a ton of fun.
It was fun.
I will post the recording on YouTube and all that great stuff. And yeah, we look forward to next month. Penny will be back, and we missed her today.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing it again sometime.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you back when we have Penny and when Liz is not sitting on a plane. You're
right. Right.
Awesome. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, stopping.